I just want to introduce myself. My name is Jake Woolf. I'm a writer as well as the editorial director and co-founder of an e-commerce app called Seam. And now I just want to give the opportunity to our three panelists here to introduce themselves. We have Christelle, Vashti, and Mike. So I just want to give you guys a chance, if you guys could just introduce yourselves, say what you do, very, very briefly. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Christelle. I'm a director and photographer. I'm signed with Lens, the IMG family in the house. I also have a production company called Stoneman, which I founded in 2012. So we do video production, post-production. This is my friend Vashti, who's amazing. Do you want me to introduce you?
Yes, please do.
Vashti
Sorry,
is
Vashti,
a multimedia artist. She's a DJ, designer, huge influencer, major. And she's downtown sweetheart. If you don't, I mean, you know who she is, obviously. You came here for her.
Thank you.
Very iconic in downtown
Thank
New York.
you.
Was that good?
Yes. I can expand, but that was amazing. Thank you very much, Christelle. Yes, I'm an artist of all sorts. I am a director. I've directed videos for Justin Bieber, Kendrick Lamar, Solange. I'm also a designer. I was the first girl to design Jordans in 2010. And since then, I've done collaborations with Puma, G-Shock, various other brands. And I have a clothing line called Violet. I also DJ. I DJ all around the world. I've DJed for Madonna, Drake, Dior, and also dirty clubs all around the world.
I need a good intro like that. Yeah, my name is Mike Cherman. I'm the founder, creative director of Chinatown Market. Worked in streetwear and clothing for a very long time. Had a past brand that's failed and gone through the ropes of all these things. Learned a lot through these years. Created a lot of T-shirts, a lot of products. Collaborated with everyone from Puma, Converse. Worked for Nike back in the day. Done a lot of different things. I think for me, it's just all about being creative and making new things. So.
All right, thank you guys. To kick things off here, we want to talk about just defining what streetwear is. And, I thought it was really important to talk about this because, a lot of times when people are talking about streetwear, even in talks similar to this, they'll talk about the culture, like it quotes the culture, like we do it for the culture, it's about the culture, I make products for the culture. But I just want to know from you guys, what does that actually mean when people talk about streetwear culture? If you can define it, because I know it is a little nebulous, but give it your best shot.
I think, in short, I think streetwear is defined by music. It's defined by social climate, what's going on in the streets. Yeah, it's heavily defined by sport as well. So I think all of those things kind of define streetwear.
Yeah. What about you, Vashti?
I think streetwear really, for me, my definition really stems from growing up in the hood, which I grew up in, and in part with that, it was sort of the feeling or the mood sometimes is that you are not included in the bigger conversation. So if I'm not included in your bigger conversation, I'll create my own conversation. So I think a lot of things in, urban culture, hip hop culture, it's sort of, it's about creating your own. And I think for me, streetwear is born out of that essentially. It's born out of okay, I can't afford, I'm wearing a Louis Vuitton shirt, but if I can't afford something fancy, I'm gonna make my own things. Even, Dapper Dan, the idea that he took,
exactly,
high-end prints and then created garments for people in the hood. It's sort of the energy is making it your own. I actually forgot the original question.
It was just, I just want to know what the culture is.
Still valid.
So when
it's very valid,
when I think about people talking about the culture, I feel like it's about preserving something that was born out of authenticity and originality. I think in today's day and age, it's the conversation can still be had about originality and authenticity, but it's much different than, say the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, where, you just couldn't follow someone on Instagram and then copy their whole look. It was it was a different approach. So
Right.
Yeah, I think the interconnectivity of the world right now has taken what Vashti just said of all of streetwear being so niche and so small and it being the voice of authenticity to now it becoming popular culture, And I think stuff now, it's taking everything that we all have access to. We have it on our phones. I can go look at Vashti's whole life and probably, build a brand off of that. And all these things exist where corporate companies can work with small companies like our own and gain access to our culture and the things that we create and the people that we work with, the music that we do, et cetera. I think that it's when people talk about the culture, I think that in corporate world there's a lack thereof, and then when you find it with these small brands, obviously there is real culture, there's authenticity, there's these people fighting to put out what they want, and just see their creativity breathe. And I think that it's on these smaller creators to make sure that they don't use that platform incorrectly, because the corporate companies are always going to be coming and looking for a piece, but how do you parlay that on both sides so that you're not just getting used for a platform, but that you're actually using their platform for greater good?
So with Chinatown Market, how have you experienced that in terms of, working with bigger brands, but doing it in a way that still felt authentic to what your brand stands for?
Well, a lot of companies in my world, they'll work with a, big sneaker brand, and all of a sudden they're owned by them. They are the person, or they're the brand that they're only going to work with, and that's the only one that they do a project with. This year we've done a project with Crocs, we've done a project with Converse, we've done a project with Puma. We have more projects coming, but it's not that we're trying to do a million projects, it's that we're looking to do projects with meaningful actual background of design and actual purpose. But it's all about saying that we're not owned or defined by one company. We are our own platform and our own brand, and we're going to stand on our own and do it our way. But we're going to use those platforms to our benefit and make sure that we're actually getting something out of it as well. Because a lot of times, designers just get enamored by the idea of working with a Nike or working with a Converse or any of these guys, but lose sight of the fact that they have a business to run at the end of the day. And these guys are just trying to get a piece of the sauce of what we're creating and all the energy that we're putting out there to the world.
Christelle and Vashti, do you guys have similar experiences with working with larger corporations, or do you see it in a different way?
I mean, that's something that I definitely have to grapple with all the time.
Right.
Like, I get hired to, direct things that are, women focused or brown girl focused or queer focused or something. And at the end of the day, it's I have to look at the bigger picture. It's okay, a big ass company is going to get millions of dollars from this thing, and it's how do you keep the integrity of how can I be used as a vessel to carry this out so that it's not a sellout, you know what I mean? And
right.
that's a responsibility that I have to take when I get these jobs, and it can be really frustrating because in general, I don't want to just get hired for these niche projects. Hire me because you think I'm a great director, you know what I mean?
Absolutely, yeah.
But yeah, that rings.
Yeah, just really quick. I think that it's just a big thing in our world where people are afraid to have their stuff on a massive platform. And I think that people in our world need to realize that our creativity can be on the highest platforms possible. If our stuff can sell to Target or these massive retail stores, I've now gained access to millions of eyes and millions of people who can engage with the things that I've created. And I think that for me is my ultimate goal, is to reach the most amount of people possible, not to be the coolest guy forever. Because it's great to be the coolest guy. It's great to aspire to be Supreme or any of these other brands in streetwear. But the reality is that that's a kind of short-sighted way of looking at creativity. I believe that the true kind of reciprocation of it is to see you direct a movie or to see you reach millions of people. And while that may not be the direct community that you probably speak to, it's amazing when you can affect these people, and even taking those jobs where it's conflicting and turning it into that thing that becomes actually fulfilling for you and still speaks to what you do.
So to segue a little bit, Vashti, you mentioned how you were the first woman to work with Jordan. So you want to talk about that experience and maybe how it relates to what Mike and Christelle were talking about, but also just in general, what was that experience like?
Well, the experience was, mind-blowing. To sum it up for you, in 2009, I had a big birthday party, and I wanted to have a Jordan 3 as my birthday cake. I wanted a giant Jordan 3, which is my favorite sneaker of all time. And so the party happened, and all my friends at the time came out. So, a lot of the people that I was friends with at that time, we've all sort of evolved and grown and become, famous, popular, or well-known. And so a couple of the people were Kid Cudi at the time, I think he was just working at the Babe Store, maybe just finishing working at the Babe Store, working on his music. And so he came to my party. So there was a lot of people who were on the cusp that were also there. So it was an important time. So the next day after my birthday party, Hypebeast covered it. I don't know if maybe you wrote the story, because I know
No. 2009 was a little bit before me, but
okay.
it was possible.
I'm a little bit of
no, it's a good question.
A
it was a good
fossil
question
over here. So so the party happened, and Hypebeast covered it, and the whole story was about the sneaker cake, and it hit every other like online source, and people talked about it. A couple months later, I was invited to Kanye's birthday party, and he had a sneaker cake, a Yeezy cake. So I feel like I kind of helped inspire that, but I don't know. So
He definitely copied you.
So it was a sort of a big deal in the streetwear community, and so a couple months later, I'd run into a friend who was working at. I thought he was working at Nike, and we were just catching up. We were just literally like friends, and he's married with kids. We were just talking about his family, and then he's like, "Oh yeah, I heard about your birthday party," and I was like, "Oh, did you see the cake? Like the cake was like it." And I showed it to him. He's like, "Oh my God!" He's like, "I forgot. How did I forget? You love Jordans like this much? Like you're a maniac." So then he's like, "I'm at Brand Jordan now," and I'm like, "No way!" And he's like, "You have to design a girl's Jordan. Like you have to just do it." And I was like, "Okay." And to someone who grew up not being able to afford Nikes, let alone Jordans were like definitely not okay.
Right.
So for me, I was wearing like Kmart sneakers growing up, and there's no shame in that. I mean, but I just couldn't afford anything brand. So it wasn't until I was like in high school and I had my own job to afford sneakers that could feed this obsession. It's terrible. I mean, but anyway, so I told him, and he was like, "Okay, yes, we need to get you designing a Jordan." So it was sort of an unreal experience because I didn't think it was going to actually happen. The next day, he literally was like, "Okay, we got to get on the phone. We got to talk to people in Portland. We got to get this going." So, and that's sort of how it happened. And then a year later, it came out. So,
yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
So to Christelle and Vashti, how do you feel like now? I mean, that was 10 years ago. So now versus today, how has being a woman in this industry changed for you guys, or has it evolved at all? Are there things that need improving? Any comments you have about that?
I think there's a lot of women killing the game right now, for sure. I mean, it's still very much a boys' club for sure, but like Erin Magee is like super lit. She's been designing for Supreme for like over 15 years. She has her own brand, Made Me. Madeline Poole and like Paloma Essler, they're doing like the International Girls Club. They just did like 3 collabs with Nike. That's coming out like I think either this month or next month. There's a lot of women kind of like making space, and I think the industry is ready for it. I think more women just kind of need to go for it. When the ladies put themselves out there, I think people are hungry for it. There's still not enough women within the industry, but yeah, I think we're on the rise for sure.
Yeah, I think that I think it's just about being seen. Like I think that most people, they think of Supreme and they think, oh, it's a boys brand. It's all about boys. But it's like you don't know that there's actually women like Erin, who's been there for 15 years, who's actually part of like very critical like creative decisions. So I think that it's important that the women behind the scenes are basically brought to the surface. And a lot of that too, I think it just comes from being, I don't know, maybe if you're working in a company, you want to be humble and you don't want to be like, look at me, look at what I'm doing. But I think it's important because I think a lot of times too, corporations or brands or whatever, I think that they don't see it. They don't see, oh, like you're a fan of this. Like they're, at the end of the day, it's business, right? If you think you can make $1 off someone, you're going to market to them. So I think that it's all about being like readily seen. I think when I did my Jordan, the Jordan company, I feel like they didn't see women buying Jordans. Like I don't think they could really understand the market as like here now in 2019, people really see like, okay, girls love sneakers. There's, with social media. But I think that in the time that I did the Jordan, there wasn't much support from the company with that sneaker, with the rollout. As now we have a Laylee May who's amazing, and she's designing all the Jordans, and she's able to like have the support, whereas it was different in my time. But I think that because of social media, we're able to see it. So I think that's important.
100%. Yeah. In terms of sneakers, someone I know who worked for a sneaker company recently told me that a term that a lot of companies used to use, and some
Shrink it and pink it.
Shrink it and pink it, yeah. That was like the code word for just like how to make girls sneakers,
I didn't know that, but I think it takes
That's
people
so
like Vashti
gross.
to be able to kind of trailblaze all this stuff and to make it happen. And while I'm obviously not a woman, and I think also I've been a part of these boys clubs and these streetwear brands and all this stuff, I think that it does take women in the industry to be able to make this stuff happen. And it is something that I feel like sometimes people don't think it's even possible. It's just like people didn't think a few years ago that it was possible to make your own brand or do any of these things. And so I want to see more people doing it. I want to see more women being confident to put their own brands out. And, you know, it does take also, I think, industry support, you know, because I think people sometimes will see that but never support their friend, but will support another thing that's happening out there from a corporate person all day.
100%. I think it's internal and just from the consumer side as well.
Can we just go back to shrink it and pink it?
If you want to, yeah.
That is so disgusting. I can't believe that's a thing.
Yeah, it was.
Oh my God. I think that's what I struggle with the women's version of like sportswear.
Right.
Is like I don't necessarily like need a flower on a shoe. You know what I mean? I don't need it to be lavender.
Like just
for
make
me
my
to,
size and we'll be good.
Yeah, just like
Yeah,
make it in
exactly.
my size. Like and like it's cool. Like there's women that want that, but we don't all want this like super frilly, you know, sort of like feminine version of like a sneaker. Like I struggle with that for sure. Like I'm like, can I fit the smallest men's size? Maybe I can like put 3 pairs of socks on and just rock that.
This sort of plays off of what we're just talking about, but what do you guys see historically and today as the intersection between streetwear and social justice? Like about whether that's like putting a message on a t-shirt or whether that's, you know, more behind the scenes what you were talking about employing different kinds of people, et cetera.
I mean, you see brands like Kids of Immigrants, you see people out there actually making products not to make profit, but to actually affect change in someone's life. Or, you know, I even saw that brand Stray Rats just made a shirt for the Caribbean after this whole hurricane. And, you know, it's as much as those things don't really affect greater, bigger culture or these things, it's the little things that any of us can see that we're not just out here to make money and to just do business, but to actually care about our community. I think this is the biggest thing that needs to happen, you know, and it's something that we try to do every day. And with our brand is to communicate as a true friend or to try to treat these people like real people, not just wait in line, buy my t-shirt, peace. You know, because I think that's what the nature of the Supremes and all these things are, is just the nature of you're a fan, you get the product, you walk away. But I think there's got to be so much more in that conversation to have real culture connect.
But even just like historically though, I mean, you know, I feel like a lot of times these talks end up just being like all about Supreme, so I'm sorry. But the thing I wanted to bring up is like, you know, 2004, you know, Supreme came out with like "fuck Bush" stickers. So I'm talking about things like that as well, you know, like where people can use their brands to actually affect social change or just get a message out in a way that might not be possible without like T-shirts and stickers and products like that. Yeah. We can move on.
Well, I don't know like if streetwear brands are doing it enough.
Right.
I don't know, but
Yeah, there's so
streetwear
much more we
has
could probably
such
do.
a huge impact on our youth. So I think maybe.
Yeah,
I mean, the
T-shirts
only
are our
thing-
billboards, you know? T-shirts are the way you express yourself. It's like, it's the simple thing. If you were a kid, you couldn't afford to buy all these other shit, but you had the ability to go buy a T-shirt to represent how you felt or who you were.
It's a low barrier to entry product.
Yeah, when I was a kid in high school, I was designing T-shirts for this little small streetwear brand in San Diego, and I made a shirt that said, "I'm out like the vapors," and it was a picture of George Bush with a little peace sign, because I was so happy at the time that Obama was getting elected and all these things were happening, and I was so passionate about politics, and, you know, it was a moment where it was a big change time in the world, but I kind of almost don't see as much of that same energy that when we got rid of Bush to bring Obama in, that when we all see this problem with a president like Donald Trump, and I don't know if I see as much energy on, like, you know, that anti-thing there, you know, and it's like, it's almost like we're defeated. And I talk to so many people and we're like, well, it looks like we got another 4 years, like we're fucked, you know, and it's like, I'm interested in how we don't take action in the same way.
Do you think some of that plays into what you were talking about before about the mass marketing of streetwear?
Of course, and it's also a scary time because I can't go out and probably do certain things on a corporate level because it affects, you know, the money conversation or the thing that's going to happen with those guys. But on our personal level, we can do it and stand on a platform as a brand and talk about it. And so it's a very challenging thing to probably grapple with because, you know, you probably directing a video or you doing a music video or any of these things coming out, if it becomes politically charged, it's like this moment where you have to choose, like, is this the thing I want to do? Just like my friends in Hong Kong right now have to choose whether or not they say, you know, I'm anti-China or I'm pro-China, or just not saying anything at all because they have to protect their business, you know, and all the things that have to happen, which is a really interesting moment right now in business and politics and just personal feelings because we're all so involved in it. Not that I think that was the question, but I took it to left field.
No, is there anything that you guys want to add to that?
I don't know, this isn't directly adding to that, but I think like something that just popped into my mind is like a takeaway is just how influential streetwear can be. It's like if Supreme did decide to put out a shirt that was like fuck bullying, like then that gives like people the power to say like, no, I'm actually against this and I'm gonna like wear it on my sleeve. So I think that's like really something like an important thing to take away as like, I don't know, we make stuff and put things out there. If we have a platform that's like huge, I think I would love it if designers could remember that they have such power in putting messages out there.
And sorry, go ahead.
I
Magee.
was going to say that also, that I do respect a brand's, vision. Like if Supreme wasn't like pro-community in 1997, why should they be pro-community necessarily now? Not saying that they shouldn't be involved, but I also, at the end of the day, respect the designer and the brand and their vision and how they see their brand. But I, on a positive note, have noticed that a lot of brands have been doing like limited edition T-shirts that the proceeds go to charity. So I feel like we as a community right now, we're definitely more involved than we were. And I think that that's really important to note in this very strange time, is that we are very community-based now. We're learning, we're evolving. So I think that's important just to say, I don't know.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. So in this same world, talking about social change, I thought it was important to mention where we are. We mentioned, women and men, but there are also, a multitude of different ways to look at gender. So I just wanted to ask, where are we at? And maybe Christelle, you could do a good job of answering this. Is where are we at in terms of, gender fluidity in terms of streetwear, which has always typically been a male-dominated industry, and now, more women are involved, but there are still so many other, people out there in the world that maybe don't subscribe to those like concrete categories. So where do you think the industry is at in that, and where are there, if any, is there room to improve?
I guess the industry is kind of moving towards like more of like a unisex world. And I think like, if you talk to kids today, a lot of kids don't really necessarily want to define themselves within the binary at all. Like there's so many kids who are non-binary, and so many kids who just like don't necessarily feel the need to gender themselves or kind of subscribe to like gender norms, and that's so beautiful and amazing. And I mean, so many brands have been like rocking like the unisex ethos for a bit, like Luar or like HBA, Telfar. These are classically, unisex brands. I also think like they're also like historically very queer, and it's really cool that I think we're stepping into a world that it's not just necessarily like queer underground brands that are thinking unisex is important. As a whole, in general, I think more people are realizing that gender is kind of not mattering that much anymore.
Right,
so.
Right.
Yeah, my girlfriend looks better in my clothes than I do. It's just like the way I watch her shop and the way I watch her dress and the way I watch even other women dress. It's no longer like I want to go to a women's store to buy stuff. Like I'm buying a pair of pants, she's like, I'm probably gonna look good in those too. And it's like, it's just a reality. If you look at Vashti's style, you look at Christelle's style, like, a guy could wear the Ben Davis shirt, a guy could wear this Louis Vuitton shirt, the ripped denim, the whole swag, And so I think it's now no longer this barrier of like, no, you dress this way and I dress that way. And, it's just like guys wearing girls' clothes. It's all normal. When I was in high school and I moved to San Diego, I started seeing kids wear girls' jeans. I was like, this is so crazy. I lived in the suburbs in New York when I grew up. It's like the different kind of way. But as I started moving and traveling and seeing how people were, I just realized there's no rules to this. Whereas when we're raised and we see this, like I have family in Tennessee who's totally disconnected from everything, and it finally made me realize, well, I hate some of their views and the way they, live their life, et cetera. It's like they're just not seeing some of the things that we're all seeing. They're not traveling the world to understand different cultures. And, my travels to Asia, my travels to Europe, my travels to all these different countries, going to factories, going to all these places, you understand that all these people have different lives and have different experiences and the way that they come up. And I think it just helped me to understand all these things better. But so many people lack that understanding of people and lack that understanding of just real life.
And Vashti, from your perspective, because I know, even growing up as a kid, like you mostly wore guys' clothes, and it's something that you've always done extremely well. I think it's like one of the reasons why people like you so much, because you've always pulled it off so well. So yeah, just when did you first, like, I don't know, growing up as a kid, like when did that start, and how has it changed now that like you're an adult and over even the past 10 years, like since you first got involved in this industry? That was pretty loaded, I'm sorry.
Yes, that was very loaded. So I feel like, I just always was a tomboy. Like I wasn't interested in like wearing pink or not to say that defines being a woman or a girl, whatever, but I just felt like more comfortable in men's clothes. I had an older brother and I would just wear everything he wore. felt more connected to that sort of style. And I think also at the time in the 90s, it was like, you know, TLC, Aaliyah, it was like that was very common that girls would maybe wear a crop top but baggy jeans or baggy sweatshirts. Like it was sort of the thing. And I'm a Taurus, and I like routine, so I've been dressing the same since I was a kid. So for me, menswear is very, like, a part of that. And I think that, you know, when I was growing up in the 90s and 2000s, especially, like, coming to New York and wearing Jordans and baggy jeans, like, it wasn't accepted. It wasn't, like, a thing. Like, usually, like, it was hood girls who dressed like that. But, you know, making my mark in coming to New York, it was like there were clubs that would literally be like, "You're not coming in here. You're wearing sneakers. Like, what do you think?" Like, so I feel like it's interesting now because now it's the norm. It's like, you know, you can be wearing a Celine like dress and then wearing sneakers. You know, so I think it's definitely a cooler time. But growing up, it wasn't as cool, and I think that for me to evolve now into womanhood is interesting because we were talking earlier about I went to this Vanity Fair event last night and it was a cocktail party and I had a dress on and then I was like, I totally don't feel comfortable in this dress. Like I wanted to wear something more like me, but so it's definitely a challenge trying to figure out like my look in, you know, as I'm evolving, as I'm going to these upscale events and sort of wanting to participate in my way. So
Yeah, absolutely. I think you did a great job answering my very loaded question, by the way, with like 6 parts in it. Yeah, so switching gears a little bit to social media. I know it's like also a big hot panel talk topic, but I am interested, Mike, you know, in terms of your brand in Chinatown Market. I think you guys have approached social media in a much different way than a lot of other streetwear brands. I think a lot of times people in this industry are very careful. It's all very, very thought through. It's curated. Every image is very particular, and like we only release them at this time, like this many days before a launch. You guys have sort of gone the exact opposite way, and it's something I think is really cool about how you know you guys are very, very loose and fast on Instagram and on social in general. You'll just be like responding to something that happened. Here's a new T-shirt. Like go, go, go. What led to that sort of approach that is so different from other streetwear brands?
I just think naturally how I work is so fast, and when we were first starting this brand, it was myself making the shirt, shipping the shirt, designing the shirt, doing every single step. And so I think I had the ability, I was saying to myself, like, why do I have to wait each season to drop a collection? I can just drop new T-shirts whenever I have a new idea. And when I have a new concept, I can literally have the idea by 8 a.m., it's online by noon, and it's shipping by the next morning. You know, so all that concept was just applied to the business and then applied to social media. We want to treat you like a friend. We want to feel like you're in our community. We want to be inclusive, not exclusive. I think that streetwear has always been treated like this thing, like you should be happy that you got this T-shirt. But honestly, I think it's bullshit because it's like the whole thing of us working our ass off to be able to earn that T-shirt. We should feel like we're a part of that community and that this company cares about us, you know, because otherwise, what are we really doing but wearing a slogan on a T-shirt? And so for me, it's always about how can we include these kids. We just did design a T-shirt live literally on our Instagram last night, and all these kids just went FaceTime live on our Instagram. These kids could like design their own shirt, and then we literally are shipping them these shirts for free. And each week, we have like 24 kids who will all get a free shirt, design it on the live with different things that we lay out for them, and then they get a free product. You know, and while I'm not making money off that, it's amazing marketing, and it's an amazing way for us to engage with these kids authentically. You know, at first these kids are like, this is a scam, like this is all fake marketing, but they started seeing these kids get on the live and just be tripping out, like, I'm from Virginia, I can't believe that you guys even like answered this. And then the fact that they're getting a free product shipped to them, it's like just the whole engaging part of it that most brands would never even open the curtain that way. And we want to show people that it's okay to fail. You know, we all fail every day, but it's the most crippling thing right now that you see from kids in the industry and just kids who aspire is that they're so afraid to fail, they'll never try. And I think that that's the one thing that I need to get through to kids is like, you can do it, but if you're afraid to fail, you're never going to do anything great because we all fail every day. But we have to be okay with that and learn from it. Otherwise, how do we ever get better?
I mean, in terms of Christelle and Vashti, your work, do you feel like social media or Instagram has allowed you to be more open, or do you also feel like the pressure to be that sort of hyper-curated version of yourselves when you're when you're promoting your work or...
I'm like, this is very deep. This is therapy right now. No, I feel like
Is that good?
social
Can
media
we
is
lie down
interesting
and answer this?
because for me, I had like a community of people who like followed my career and the work
Right.
that I did. I had a blog that I started in 2007 called Vashti.com, and it was basically before I had social media. It was just sharing my life. It was like going to get cookies with Lupe Fiasco, or like going to the Bape store with Cuddy. So it was sort
Or
of
your
like,
cat.
yeah, or my cat, or just.
I followed the blog. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's like this. Like
It was, yeah, it was a lot of like nonsense but fun stuff. But and so as I've evolved into social media, in the beginning I didn't share anything about myself. I was just like, oh, here's my cat, or here's the Smiths, or something like random. And then I started to realize, oh, I need to grow as a brand, like on this. This is a tool. Like to me, in the beginning it was fun, and then I was like, okay, no, wait, it's a tool. So then I started just posting things of what I was doing, and then it became, and if anyone follows me or will look at it later, but it sort of also became, okay, oh, now I'm here at this event, and look at me, and now I'm also as a growing human being, I'm realizing, okay, I'm meeting young people who like know nothing about me but are huge fans, and I'm like, okay, do you know like that I did this or that? And not to say that they need to know facts about me, but the people who have followed my career like know what I've done. And I meet young people who were inspired by me, but that are also now inspiring me. And so those are the people that I know come from like the long line of like my work or just knowing about me. But the new people don't know me, and then sometimes people hear me talk and they're like, you talk, that's your voice? Like they don't know anything about me. And so they don't know that like I'd prefer to be at home with my cat, or going to see Morrissey on Broadway like blew my mind. Like, so I feel like for me now, it's just now I have to insert all of those elements into my social media because it kind of got lost. So I think that as I'm growing and evolving, I'm realizing that showing just the glossy side of you every time, and I don't do that every time, but it's just showing more personality, because young people now, they're literally just glimpsing. They're not necessarily even reading a caption. Like, so I feel like it's important to visually share that tool, because also we're international, right? A lot of people English is not their first language, so I need to share more that is about my personality or the things that I care about, which even maybe ties back into brands and corporations maybe being more visually involved, because sometimes a lot of those brands and corporations donate to charities. They are involved, but they're not showing it. So I think that it's important to show it, because once people see it, then it's infectious. Then it's like, okay, yeah, I want to donate to that, or I want to, be a part of that community. So
kids are smarter nowadays. Kids no longer can just see, Vashti post a sneaker and be like, I'm buying that sneaker. It's like, it's actually, is it a personal video from her? Is it seem like it was shot on her iPhone? Is it authentic? Because nowadays it's like, even when we do a video, I went and did a whole photo shoot with Converse with a big budget, all produced, and those photos did worse than the video of me literally walking the shoe outside and the shoes changing color. And that was just a simple video, and it's like that little 2-minute video that I just did that took no time. I asked my employee to just like film me while I was doing it, got more engagement and more return, and got shared across the entire internet than the massive production whole photo shoot we did. And it's like those kind of moments you realize, like Vashti showing her day, probably having breakfast and making her like tea in the morning is probably more engaging for some kids than her posting like, hey, I'm with this massive company, because people are like, that's cool, we love watching her flashy life, but I want to know what it's like when she's not being cool.
Well, Christelle, because you're someone who works in a visual medium, so how has it affected your work in the way that you approach social media as maybe not just a platform to share your work, but also for people to get to know you as well?
I was actually just taking notes from Vashti just now, because I think social media is an interesting thing. Like at some point, like a few years ago, had to take off everything personal on my Instagram, because I was like, whoa, I look like hella drunk and like I look nuts. You know what I mean? I had to like really like make it super professional.
Like at CB2? Sorry.
He found like a crazy like.
There's a good video of her after going to CB2 that you guys should look up after
Oh
this
my
on
God.
YouTube.
Wow. It's going to go from 100 views to like 102. But it's fun. Social media is something that I still like. I'm still trying to figure out. Like mostly, if you go on my Instagram, it's mostly work driven with like sprinkles, and I mean sprinkles of like real life. I think I get crazy on stories. That's where I can get a little bit more personal. But it's really work driven, and so like I have a Finsta. Like if anybody cares to see all those janky photos, but yeah, I'm taking notes, because I can never tell. I feel like social media is like this ever-changing thing. I don't know if people want to see my work or if they want to see my life. Like I can't ever tell.
I think the Finsta is good, because I feel like just if it's just because it's Christelle, I don't know, studio. Yeah. Yes, okay. So because it's a studio, then I would assume, okay, just your work. But the stories, I feel like it's fine. I feel like that's where you can go ham, and it's like, what are you actually doing? Let me click that. But
For sure. Where are we with time?
is there a Glenlivet on ice that I can get?
I need 2.
Make that
You?
3.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was waiting.
You know what I'm saying?
So yeah, if we're asking like one big final question, let's do this actually goes back to something we got into very early, but streetwear is so massive nowadays. We have streetwear brands that are worth $1 billion. We've talked about them a bunch already, so I'm not gonna say their name again, but they're worth $1 billion. And so I want to know, does the industry still have room to grow, or is this as big as it's ever going to be? It's so mass market, you guys have been talking about the biggest companies in the world are also doing streetwear items. Has it peaked, or is there still room for streetwear to become an even bigger industry globally, worldwide?
I'll be fast. Not peaked. It has not peaked.
Yeah, it hasn't peaked. I mean, you look at Target doing a 20-year celebration of all the massive designers they've worked with, from Isaac Mizrahi to, I'm sure there's like a just list of amazing designers I could probably go off right now. But it's things like that, one day I want to see all these like streetwear brands that we all talk about. I want to see Vashti on a platform, for the world. I think that all of us have the ability to affect popular culture and to get out there. And so while sure, there's, that brand is worth over $1 billion, or these are streetwear brands making millions of dollars, and people are building real businesses. There's so much more room for growth. There's so much more room for these designers to affect massive popular culture and for their creativity to be seen by the world.
Yeah, I guess I was also just thinking about just how many releases there are now. There's so many sneakers coming out. There's so many T-shirts, so many hoodies, so many brands out there. How can it get even bigger from here? I mean, I know you kept it quick, but I'm just thinking just in terms of the amount of products that are released just on a weekly basis. Like there's 4 new Nike sneakers every week.
I mean, there has to be another fallout. There has to be another kind of recession of clothing and streetwear and just in general. I mean, we all have been seeing flourishing business for quite a little while now, and we all can't forget what happened in 2008. And so while sure we might be seeing some success from Chinatown Market, like, I'm still being very conscious of what's happening in the world, and whether it's this trade war or it's things happening in international business, or even just in trend and how everything looks the same. We have to constantly work to be more progressive and be smart in what's happening in the business. So
I have a question, actually.
You guys all look like all your answers are way better with like these in hand. By the way. It's like it
I'm
imbues
curious,
you with.
You actually just made me think of something, because you were like, there's all these drops and all these things, and I'm like, how can people afford this? Like, how are kids affording it?
Credit cards.
How credit cards, their
Credit
moms,
cards,
their
scammers.
dads. But like,
Also true.
Like, I'm curious on the like designer brand side of things. Do you guys think that if there was a streetwear brand that was like super affordable, like mad affordable, could that be cool? Or does coolness inherently have something to do? Because I know you're trying to break down like this exclusivity thing that like you want your brand to be exclusive. But what if there was like some sort of cool ass brand where like T-shirts were like literally $20 and like sneakers were like at most $50? Would that pop off? I'm curious. Like, what do you guys think?
I think yes. But I think it just takes the right people behind it, because usually those kind of things are offered to you at a mass scale without any authenticity and without any real people behind it. But there are moments where you see, like, a bad example, but Alexander Wang for H&M, or any of these like big moments where a designer goes and does it for a massive platform, and people go crazy because they have the opportunity now to access something.
But it's also limited.
Of course, it is limited, but it's limited on a way different scale because there's so many more people who want access to it. And so there is a conversation of giving access to people so they can have it. And I definitely think that there's always a challenge of like, supply and demand. So
I don't know. I mean, if affordable could also equate into limited, because the thing is that, I mean, streetwear to me, it's also defined by the authenticity, the originality, but also, the cool factor. And it's like, you don't want to walk into a room and see that half the room is wearing the same brand that you're wearing. Obviously right now we're facing that, but I think it's, you want to have variety and diversity, and you want to feel like you're your own person. I mean, if you're speaking about streetwear, I mean, for other people, maybe they want to feel like they fit into a crowd, but with streetwear, I feel like it's all about standing out.
It's a hard one.
So do you guys feel like what Mike said about there is a a fallout we're due for a fallout that's going to
I
happen?
think so, probably.
I mean, it's just like anything. There's so many brands, so many new brands that pop up every single day, and then any corporate company right now can go hire a Mike, a Vashti, and any of us to go and literally build a brand tomorrow. If we literally wanted to, pillage our entire creativity, our culture, and anything, and they got the right person to do it, they could go make it look totally real, totally authentic, and make it happen now. But I think that kids are getting smarter. Kids are putting that pressure back on brands, and there's no longer that fake thing that's out there.
Anything else?
I don't know if that really answered it.
No, you good. Like I said, everything sounds good with the.
Cheers.
Yeah. All right. Well, I just want to thank you three for getting up
You
here.
can get your
so
Glenlivet
much.
cocktail at the front. It's called the Purple Rain.
Thank you, guys.
And we're gonna do
Hashtag
a quick
ad.
Q&A now. Yeah. So if anyone has a question.
Hi, I'm Harriet Cole. I have a 15-year-old, and when I listened to you, Vashti, talk about when you were young, you couldn't afford to buy whatever the sneakers were. I could buy her anything within reason, but we want to give limits. And so I'm curious as to what messaging can occur. Do you offer to teens who want to be cool, but also we don't want them to be the biggest consumers when they don't even have jobs yet? There's a fine line. I'm just curious about, do you have sensitivity to that in your work?
In my work, yes. Thank you, Harriet. I feel like for me, because I grew up, my parents are very working class. We couldn't afford much. My parents were both immigrants from Trinidad. And, I was the youngest of three, so I basically had hand-me-downs for the majority of my life. And my brother and sister were 8 years older than me, so it wasn't cute. But I think for me, because it's, ingrained in me, for a lot of times I didn't see my mom because she was working double shifts. Or my dad would come home so late, so it was like we didn't really actually have conversation. I didn't have, I had a different home experience than maybe a lot of people. But I think for me now in my work, and I know what I know from my childhood, and I try to share that on my social media. I think that that's probably the number one place where I'll talk about, I grew up like this, or, I worked really hard, or I watched my parents work hard. And I kind of, in my captions, try to share that, which I was just, maybe now I'm learning too, that through, how can I do that through images? But I think that for me, it's always something that I talk about. My Joanna, who's on my team, she always jokes that I always say I'm from the hood. But I feel like it's an important conversation that I say all the time, because when I meet people, they don't just assume where I'm from or what I've been through or whatever. So I think it's important to share that. But I think going back to young people, I think I try and share what I've gone through, and then explain it in a way that if I hadn't had the hardships that I've had, I know I wouldn't be here. I just absolutely know that we wouldn't have this conversation right now. So I think that that's something I try and share, but I don't know how much that, can be absorbed, but I try.
Yeah, it's a scary time right now. I watch my friends, kids get ridiculed at school for wearing fake Supreme, even though they're wearing a real shirt, because, their parents got them the shirt from one of their friends, and these moments now where, the same things we deal with in high school are now on an elementary level, and it's, what you wear is actually defining you as a kid. And so while, I run a company that is trying to convince kids to buy t-shirts every day, it is something that is really scary to watch, and I can't say that we can fix the problem ourselves, because, these kids have phones in front of themselves and they're literally getting marketed to every day, whether I'm making a funny video or I'm, posting a new shirt. And not that I'm intending for a 13-year-old to become a consumer and only focus on t-shirts, but it's hard, because I know what I felt when I was a young kid, and if I didn't have the cool new shirt, or I watched all these kids have new streetwear and the new brand that I wished I could afford, and just as I started to get in this industry that I could earn a free shirt or these things, but I try to convert it into inspiring these kids to do it themselves, to say that you buy a pair of Chuck Taylors, you can literally go and put a Nike swoosh on them and make your own pair of Nike Converse shoes that will never exist. You can go make that t-shirt if you really want to, and you see something that we do, go knock it off and go do it yourself, because you made that shirt with your hands and you should be proud of it. So yes, I'm making money off these kids, and I can't say that I could probably have to stop right now, because it's part of my business and how I survive, but I also think that I want to inspire that creativity so that hopefully at least a few percentage of those kids go out and do it themselves, and maybe one day come back to me and say, hey, I was inspired by you and I built a brand.
Christelle? Or no? We can go on to the next question if you want.
Yeah, I think we. Yeah.
Yeah,
let's go.
okay.
Hey, Obi on Yahoo WWD. How are you guys? Hey, how are you? I'll try to keep the intro to this question brief, but I basically like grew up in streetwear. It was all that I knew before I entered the industry, and a lot of you just touched on just like the right words of like the authenticity. But Vashti, I think you had mentioned that that streetwear was basically like not being involved in the conversation and creating your own. And that started to get me thinking of just like, sort of just a broad question, but how much of streetwear do you think still belongs to the streets?
I think that it's definitely, it's evolved. I think that it's a very heavy question. I don't know. I feel like it's evolved, right? So because a lot of the brands that I grew up with, not that I grew up with, that kind of were born in the '90s, that when I was a teenager and kind of stumbling upon, they've grown to like a huge like level. And I feel alienated now because the thing about streetwear for me was that it was for an outsider. And so as an outsider, you found inclusivity with these brands that spoke directly to you, whether it was, Thrasher or Supreme or, Echo. Like all the brands that were born sort of in that era, it was like you're a graffiti artist or you're a skateboarder or you're a nobody who lives in the hood. Like it was sort of all for you. So I feel like in this era, it's grown and it's evolved. And I look at the people wearing the brands that I, didn't have to wait in line for, because no one had to wait in line for it then. But and I see it now, and I sort of feel like I don't have a place with that brand. I still love them and respect them, but if I'm speaking from the position of being from the streets, I don't feel it, But I think what's important is that brands like Chinatown Market, Awake is a really great brand. Just knowing that there are new brands that are being born every single day and sort of changing the game. But maybe that's just about evolution. Like maybe one brand or the 5 brands that I love can't stay on top of it forever, And they're also growing. They're also figuring out themselves. So I'm not mad at that either. But
maybe it's just natural,
Yeah.
Like the brands that were around 20 years ago are now bigger, and then there are brands, like Awake and Noah are 2 brands that came out of Supreme.
Yeah.
And both
and Made
those,
Me.
Yeah, and Made Me, yeah. And so even with a brand like Noah, I think like they're doing a lot in terms of just the way they run their business in terms of social justice and things like that too. So it's just like the old ones get bigger, and then it's up to like the new generation to make it happen for the youths. Another question? We have time for another question? We good?
I got one.
Okay.
My question is about sustainability, because we are seeing like mass repercussions of just the fashion industry's impact on climate change. And we're not really even talking about it that much yet, but it's gonna, when you talk about fallout, like the kids are actually way more in tune with it. And then the thing is like, it takes 2,400 gallons of water to make a t-shirt. And so we can put a t-shirt and say like, climate change, but is that actually positive for climate change? And as people start to get all this information, like the kids are gonna react. And streetwear actually creates probably a large amount of waste. I grew up watching the riots against Nike in Portland and being like, oh my God, like what is happening? Like who makes these clothes? And beyond that, like we haven't fixed a lot of problems. Like Champion, the t-shirt line, like they still make in sweatshops. It's like, when are we gonna start talking about like how we kind of are using a lot of resources, including people, to make our clothing, and what are we going to do to change that? So that's my question.
No, it's a really good
That's
question.
a really amazing question, yeah.
No, and it's a big challenge. I think it's something that we have to actively try to address every day. For us, it's, we try to take a vintage program where literally every single kid in my office has the opportunity to go to a local rag house, pick garments, repurpose them, build a whole collection themselves, shoot that photo shoot, and then essentially release this vintage stuff. But while I say all of that, I know that the other side of my collection is affecting the environment and is creating problems. We're actively working on finding ways to be able to do it, and I will say that it's a lot easier easier for a big company to probably change the way they do business and to change the way that they create stuff than it is for a massive corporation to go find a new factory, invest that money, and do it. So with all that said, I think it's something that is a big task for all of us, and it's something that we actually all have to work on. And it is a big challenge, because it is, as a small company, not as easy for me to go and just say, hey, I'm going to charge these kids $20 more for a T-shirt because I now have to get it out of recycled fibers. I have to now find recycled inks and recycled poly bags and recycled neck labels. And there's so many steps of that supply chain. So it is an active thing that we have to work on. And I think it's also going to come probably a lot through laws and things that have to be instilled, because otherwise, it's, money kind of pushes a lot of these big corporations to continue to produce more stuff. And, Nike's making millions of shoes that none of us ever see every day, because those shoes go to Payless, they go to, the discount store, and it's being made for the discount store already. There's no longer this feeling of fashion where it's being created and then it goes through that cycle. Like, there's already product that's being sold straight to TJ Maxx, being sold to off-pricers and all these things. And that even is a even crazier side of it, because it's product that's being created for non-need. And so, I will say that a big thing for us is that we don't go and produce just a ton of product ahead of time. We usually sell that product and produce what we need to make to ship that stuff. And so, there is a lot that we have to do, and, not that probably answers probably your exact question, but, it's in the little things as much as we can do to try to improve that process to make it as least wasteful as possible.
Anything else?
I just think that the conversation's important, because I didn't know that it takes that much water to make one T-shirt. So I think that this is, we're evolving. I don't think that, I think that the conversation's important, and I think that we'll just ultimately be able to evolve even faster, because now that literally my brain's going in a million different directions. I'm like, oh my God.
No, this gets into the Amazon. This gets into the thing where, like, Eddie Wong posts that he's not going to eat meat anymore, but he owns a restaurant that serves meat. So it's like, all right, that's great that you said you're going to stop eating meat, but then, all right, you have a whole restaurant that serves pork, beef, all these things. And so I'm like, I support that Eddie goes on that platform and does that, but then is that really affecting change?
Well, I think you see it in streetwear too. I mean, there are companies who are like, we're making blah, blah, blah that's made out of all recycled something, but then you're like, well, you're still making a new shoe.
We did it for Earth Day. I made a shirt made out of recycled bottles, but I know that the next 10 shirts I released were made out of new cotton that was created and dyed and washed. And, while we're working with recycled, dyes and all these things that we can try to repurpose, there's so many other parts of the process that are not, as environmentally friendly. And while I really focus on having great factories, great people who do things, and, I think that there's always also another conversation of people like to say made in China is shit or it's treated as crap, but there's many amazing factories and many amazing places that actually have great employees, pay their people right, and take care of their people. Whereas, like, you can go to some places in Midtown New York and see the most fucked up sweatshops you've ever seen. And so I've seen it here, I've seen it in America, and also when we talk about quality, sometimes made in USA does not mean made well. So.
Yeah, just quickly, and we'll move on to the next question. Just reminds me of something that Errolson Hugh from Acronym said recently, which is like the most acronym thing you can do is like not buy an acronym jacket, which I thought was pretty cool. Maybe not good for business, but he's cool, so it worked for me. One more question? Okay, one more question. If no one has a question, oh, there we go, right here.
I was just wondering, as like an individual, really, if you draw inspirations from other mediums of art, how do you incorporate that in fashion? Because I know, like, where you grow up and the things you see on a daily basis influence you, but I was just wondering personally, like, which are like the most important for y'all?
I think it's our whole lives. I think it's everything that's gone into it. I think it's the things you look at when you're walking to work. It's like when I lived in New York for so many years that just living here was the inspiration, seeing people walk past me and just seeing how they were dressing, how they were living, and, all that. So, while at the same time, I will say that it does create problems nowadays that we all have access to the same Instagrams, books, websites, and everything. So many times I've seen people get called out for copying someone, but then there's so many times where you're like, this person just happened to make the same idea. They happen to, have the same inspiration and create the same product. And at the same token, there's the Dia Pradas out there calling out every single little thing that goes wrong. And so, it's an interesting one because there's two sides to every story. And there's, we all are inspired by so many different things and by the people around us. And to be ignorant to that is to not realize that, like, I could watch what Vashi does on a story tomorrow, and then I could be inspired by this thing that she filmed, and all of a sudden I make a design out of it, and it is a very fine line between what's okay and what's not okay, and we definitely walk that line a lot in streetwear, and it's something that is always a good conversation.
I mean, I think like it's funny, my style has evolved so much, but I've seen it go from like right now I'm back where I used to be in high school. Like, you know what I mean? It's so funny, and I feel like that's how life is, particularly with style. Like, I think like the younger I was, that's when I was exploring, and that's when I was like my most authentic self, because I was just literally wearing things that inspired me, that it wasn't from Instagram, it wasn't like anything like that. I used to wear like cat chokers and stuff. Like, I went to Walmart and I bought like every single color like version, and I would like tie my hair up with like a colored pencil that would like coordinate with my outfit. I was crazy. I was heavily inspired by Delia's catalogs. I had like all of them.
There's an Instagram that is an Instagram account that does all of the Delia's.
Oh my God. Okay, I'm following. But that was my Bible. And then moving to New York, I tried to be like more chic. Like when I first got here, like as like cheaply as I could. Like I was trying to look like I had it together. And then now I feel like now that I'm like established and like I have a career, I'm like, you know what? I can wear this to a panel. It's all good. So I mean, I'm personally inspired by the music I listen to, and also like my community. Like I have so many friends who are like making stuff. Like my shoes are by like my best friend Nicole Saldana. Like this is by Madeline Poole. It's Fever Room. Like it's like the stuff that my friends make. Like I typically fuck with and can figure out how to integrate it into my everyday style. So, yeah, that's it for me.
All right. Well, once again, I just want to thank the three panelists up here: Mike, Vashti, Christelle.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out.